As we get here, by the way, game 1 of our second series. By the way, sub to All Things Real Time is Lorimbo, as he says, sub to All Things Real Time, which is actually a really, on YouTube and Spotify, it's a great resource if you're trying to go and learn about Stormgate a little bit. Lorimbo has some great opinions, sometimes some interesting opinions, but overall, very passionate opinions, and it's definitely worth a listen.
Yeah, and I like that, right? Like, sometimes, even if you're not right, you're going to bait out the person who is right, who doesn't want to tell you. They want to keep the top secrets, right? Like, you could say that Albino does something wrong in this game, and then all of a sudden he has to answer back. And all of a sudden, you've just gotten all that extra info for free. And I can guarantee you, Albino is going to be cooking. This guy, I'm impressed by the way that he kind of iterates the meta. You've obviously got that brainchild with the Org AM that he's a part of, right? Like, there's a decent amount of players on there that know the game inside and out. I'm curious to see how much those type of clans are going to play into the Stormgate competitive scene, because some scenes, you know, just don't have it at all, right? It's just independent people. Whereas others, historically, have had these kind of brain trust groups in certain regions.
Yeah, I gotta say, though, I am really happy that we don't have the team house anymore. Like, the Korean team houses, they created great games and whatever, but they were honestly borderline abusive. You're sitting here, you're just grinding for like 14 hours a day or more. They have weights on your wrist so you kind of have better APM, but you also wonder why like all the Korean Terrans have wrist issues now. Like, yes, they did. There was this grinding, this absolute just time chamber of really good RTS players. But I think in the balance of things, I'd rather have players that are like maybe slightly worse, and that's questionable, that are actually somewhat healthy. So,
I mean,
you know,
team houses are more about content, right? And like, let's be totally real, most of esports does content bad, right? I feel like most time players don't want to do content, so that's the only reason team house makes sense. But I agree, it gets abusive. And, you know, I'm always reminded of the fact that the grind culture can be really bad as well. Like, I've talked to players about this, that they went from playing 12 hours a day down to playing like 8 hours, and they spend an extra few hours reviewing or like, you know, strategizing, and they've gotten a lot better because of it. You know, there's more ways to improve than just, I'd say, the most bodily abusive forms of grind.
Now, I do want to, I agree with you, but I do want to talk for a second about this opener, because Albino is doing something kind of interesting where he didn't open Shrine first, but he opened Vault Shrine on like 9-10 or something like that. So really cutting here to make sure he gets his Shrine down. And if he can get away with this is the best of both worlds. It means you can still creep, you can still establish this map control, you can go and get the speed camp. We see Fiends everywhere stealing the other speed camp, at least trying to. And again, we are seeing this where, yes, this is a little bit spooky. You only have brutes early on, you don't have a ton of production. We actually finally are seeing Ethereum get mined, but it took a second. And yeah, that's important. But because he's been able to get away with this, look at this. This is a third Shrine down before, like, what are we at, 5 minutes or so? I love a timer eventually, but this is third Shrine before 5 minutes. And we're seeing Hellspawn Resurgence just pop here. The economy of Lorimbo in this game number 1 is going nutty. And we're hitting a point kind of now where these Lancers, these 5 Lancers that Albino has, I don't know exactly what he's transitioning into. Kinetic redirect early on.
Hard Lancers, yeah.
Yeah, this is where it gets scary.
I think this is smart though. Like he's read Lorimbo quite well. What he's doing on this triple Shrine base, like, it's great once he's up, right? But we know that it takes a lot longer for Infernals. It's like, in some ways, Vanguard kind of feels like that get-rich-quick scheme where you like make an investment, get it back quite fast. Whereas I always see Infernals more like a 10% yield each year, which is still crazy, but it takes time. So this timing around Kinetic Redirection and Mass Lancer could be the perfect blocker. We've only got, what, 2 brutes coming in as well. He hasn't got that many gaunts to the backside, but these, remember, can be a liability. And the Kinetic Redirection is going to allow him to start diving in here. So we are going to get the effigy popped out, immediately gets deleted, and now the movement with the Shroudstone way too early has to be cancelled out here. Looks like the Shrines are going to go up. It makes me wonder, has Albino switched it up? Because I feel like the Lancers have stopped.
I mean, this is deja vu from the last patch, right? You go and you take the health camp and you just put pressure on this third base. There's a reason why we stopped seeing Infernal players taking this third base for a couple reasons, but this is one of them. Is now Kinetic Redirect going Gaunts. I mean, there's just not enough here. These Lancers are so tanky and they're so fast. You lose one, you kite it out back to the speed zone. And Albino, we talked about him cooking. Yeah, he's been cooking. He is in the kitchen right now. Everything, maybe not everything is going to go down, but these are excellent trades. And again, he's got 2 bases here. This is not some 1-base shenanigans where life is just real pain if you don't kill your opponent. And let's be real here, Killer Pigeon. life is pain for Lorimbo right now. He's gonna lose this third shrine. This greed attempt is just not working.
Yeah, and you talked about being in the kitchen, and this just walks, right? He's been cooking. Look at what happened at home. Albino with the triple rack switch up into Mass Exo now on the way, after he's disintegrated the backline, right? Like, this is perfect now, because you're probably going to go into brutes. You can get easily kited here. So unless we've got some sort of tech switch coming in, which I feel like we're limited in options here, right? Ritual Chamber just came in. He's leaning into Plague Axes, into more this backline, which, as we know, can easily get kited out and killed by Exos.
Yeah, it's weird, right? If you can get critical mass of Gaunts and start to pop infest and swing things, it's fantastic. It is really what you want to do. But you really don't want, like, Gaunts early on against this amount of Lancers is just not very good. They take zero, Lancers take almost 0 damage. They take 4 damage a shot. A level 1 Lancer has 256 HP. It takes forever to kill him. And it takes 2 damage from a bounce. Like, it is nothing.
I feel like there should be these interactions where when you've selected Gaunts and you hover on Lancers, the tooltip just comes up saying good luck, right? Like, it truly is that hard of a counter. The other issue now is, like, if the Exos are scaling at a similar pace, you have to remember it's going to be, what, the 7 tower range versus the 7? But the quick draw just allows you to kind of poke in and out very freely with these Exos. And let's be totally real, the moment that happens, you're A-clicking in a fight, all of a sudden you're going to ricochet across onto these Lancers anyway. It's such a painful combo to rely on just Gaunts. Usually you want to have a bunch of brutes and then maybe like a switch into Magmadons on the way, but I just don't see that coming here.
Yeah, and a lot of this comes down to the fact that that Lorimbo took the low ground third base on the right side. That is a lot harder to defend there, and also he didn't drop a shrine. He didn't drop a Shroud Stone with the shrine. Generally, that's what this was the thing, right? This 2-base speed Lancer build was a thing last build, as now the natural dead. So Lorimbo is absolutely cooked here. But you want to drop a Shroud Stone with your shrine because you want it to be up before the shrine's even done. That allows you to go in and kind of play defensively. And yeah, at this point, yes, there are Gaunts on the field. Yes, they have Plague Axes. That is some things we have a run by here. But Lorimbo is very dead. And that's game one. That they are. We saw yesterday, of course, that we saw some late game Infernal versus Vanguard, and that was not working out all that great. But, you know, we saw just eventually there was the outscaling. But I think if you kind of figure out you're against this Lancer tech, maybe stay on 2 bases, build some shrines, kind of turtle behind, let them exhaust themselves, because they are committing to tech that is not as high quality as kind of moving to Exo, Medtech, Vulcan, some sort of mech thing that we saw Percival doing yesterday. I gotta say, though, I'm a little worried about this map, because as we take a look at what we're seeing here, Boneyard has 2 different accesses into the main base. It is a lot harder to defend than say Broken Crown is, right? It's a lot harder to defend. So if we see Lorimbo going for this macro, very greedy opening like we saw in game number 1, it feels like it's going to be even easier maybe for Albino. It's a little longer, certainly, but maybe even easier for Albino to punish.
Yeah, and I think, look, this is the type of map where run bys are more equally accessible, right? They're more free to initiate on because you've got a very predictable opening flow into the second, and then your third is so split on the map that it's very difficult to defend. So I'm expecting both players to lean more into a mobile comp as a result of that. Like, that's quite fluid, obviously, for the Infernals. It just makes sense to play into Gaunts, to play into brutes, but it just might make you predictable, and it might simply just be another Lancer spam like game number 1.
Yeah, I'll buy that one. And I see something actually fairly interesting in Twitch chat where someone's saying, you know, I think he could have held on if he had just gotten a greater shrine quicker and manifested a Shroud Stone. And maybe those overcharged Shroud Stones are very strong, but you have to make sure that there's a wall you can drop it behind, because Shroud Stones, you know, as powerful as that manifested Shroud Stone is, it dies so fast if Lancers dive on top of it, especially in the numbers that Albino had. So, you know, again, sure, maybe, but the SimCity was still a little bit lacking. For now, though, Natural's on the way. We're seeing the creeping up. This is pretty much the exact same build that we saw from Lorimbo in game 1. Vault into Shrine into a Conclave. But the other interesting thing about this is there is no easy third base on this map. You can go take this one, but I mean, that is way far towards the Vanguard player. You can take this one on the right side. It is so exposed. I mean, it's really hard to take a third on this map.
And it's also, you know, I think that's a good thing maybe from this situation. Like, obviously, you want to try to have more base than Vanguard on average, but you know, playing 2 base, trying to get an advantage first makes a lot more sense. Then maybe you do something crafty. Like, I haven't seen it too much so far, but the idea of sneaking to the far north, the far east, those are less scout like areas, right? Unless your opponent's using a creep scaling build, like for example when you play Seraphim, they're probably not going to go that wide. They're going to play more defensive because, as we mentioned, with all the potential kind of drive-by access points here, it makes you quite paranoid to play super wide on this map.
Yeah, it's just very, very open. For now, though, we are going to get that imp. Go and take the third base at the classic position.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if we want to call it. Oh, look at this. Oh, this dirty scout. He's just right. I can't even believe this is in range, but there is a spot here that Albino has studied. He has practiced. He knows what's up here.
Wait, but he pulled out of it. Does he not want to reveal that he's here? I think maybe he just wants to stay here and gather info. Either that or is a misclick. Okay, so he's back in range now. I don't think he's going to get noticed either. Like, it's such a crafty spot. There's no vision coming in towards him. And the decap's going to be there. So Hal's going to come through, which means he can even break away in time. But he lets him get the full cap.
Yeah, I guess you're worried about something else. Like, oh, no. Well, first of all, Big Fiend run by on the north side. It's going to yeah, this habitat is dead. So it's not it is a supply block for Albino. That's going to slow him down quite a bit. And remember, we talked about how there are multiple openings into this main base, into this natural area. One right here, one on the right side, and that can be very scary for the Lancers. That being said, if you can keep them back like this, and the rush distance is quite long, so if you can go keep them back, knock down habitats, shut down the production a little bit, slow down this Lancer spam, that can be really nice. Now, granted, that was a lot of, it was like 10 Fiends. I don't know how many of them were off the creep camps, how many of them were off of splitting brutes, but you know, that is a decent amount of supply in this early game. Lorimbo did have to trade something for that.
Yeah, but it does feel like economically Albino's ahead right now. Obviously got that third base coming in, it's going to switch things up for Lorimbo, but that's going to come at a cost. We can already see what the transition is. Exos are on the way, Quick Draw Hustle's going to be there as well. By going for these extra bases, we talked about the idea around the Infernals is it takes a lot longer to start returning that investment into your shrines. It leaves you a lot more vulnerable to these timing attacks than, say, a Vanguard player would be.
Yeah, that's certainly fair. What I'm curious about, though, is whether / okay, so we're on, I was going to say, when are we going to get to Greater Shine? When are we going to get to Tier 2? And, as importantly, as Plague Axes are on the way, do we see Lorimbo playing with Hexens? I personally believe that getting to Tier 2 Hexens, getting to Miasma, is actually the way you want to play against Vanguard right now. Because, yes, it takes a while. Yes, it takes 180 seconds to get up to those upgrades. But it makes Miasma, it makes Infest so much stronger. It's 10% HP per second, damage on top of it. And you get it at Tier 2. You don't have to wait. You don't have to spend the extra Ethereum for Tier 3. I really do think that needs to be played around with a little bit more. But we haven't seen a lot of the top level Infernal players playing with it at the moment. And right now, well, Lorimbo's going to have to be very careful because, again, on the third base, this Shroud Stone is way too late. And this army is pretty out of position too. I think this base, well, there's the Shroud Stone manifest. He's targeting down the Exos. They are maybe a little bit scarier here. And he's going to get, he's going to get 2 of them at the very least. This army, actually, this is probably enough to keep this alive. So, yeah, you spend some Animus. Yeah, you lose a Shroud Stone, but this is probably enough to stay alive.
Yeah, but the Exo poke starts to get annoying now, right? Like, if he hadn't intercepted those 2, this would already be snowballing. It turns out the second wave from Albino was just more Lancers. Kind of interesting considering we haven't had kinetic redirection prioritized at all, right? So, like, we're in a game where you're actually, maybe, I'd say, overproducing Lancers. It feels like you want to be getting more Exos out here, but Albino seems quite paranoid that he doesn't have enough front line.
Yeah, actually, this is really interesting because you look at these Lancers. I thought this was pretty much what we saw in Game 1, where you go kinetic redirect, you get that speed boost, and then you go into Exos behind. And yeah, sure, he didn't move out as fast, but even still, getting kinetic redirect is really good for the Lancers. It just lets you run straight through a lot of these armies, but I guess that's what we're not seeing here. He'd rather have Quick Draw Hustle so he can just do this infinite kite against all of the Exos. And that's the other reason, right? You talk about, okay, Miasma, it's not as great if your opponent's getting aggressive into you. It's much better if you can kind of pin them against the spot and drop Miasma on their heads. But even Venom Traps can be pretty nice here to kind of slow down some of these attacks. But for right now, again, it's just a big army fighting against each other.
It is on the way, by the way. Redirection's coming in about 15 seconds, I think it is, until it pops. Okay, no, 20, 25. So, like, in a moment, this is going to start to get pretty bad because it's almost like you've done this to maybe bait Lorimbo into adding in too many gaunts. Because, like, right now, if you see there's no kinetic redirection, you're just going to keep spamming them, right? Like, there is a potential snowball down the line, and we have to remember behind this is also a third base coming in from Albino, so he's not falling behind on economy.
No, he's not. Man, it's funny. We see these aggressive effigies, and players like Albino are so good at just targeting it down immediately. That being said, some Fiends were split off to just try to slow this down. The Lancers are starting to get pretty low. Kinetic Redirect is not ready yet. He's going to try to get ready for it, but again, it's just not there. It's ready now, but now most of the Lancers have gone down. Is this going to be enough to dive on top right now? And this is the problem. You run straight through. They attack faster. They move faster. In this position on the map, Lorimbo thought he was good. He thought it was a good position for him to be in, but these Lancers just got so much scarier.
Oh, that snipe straight away as well, just blocking out the Shroud Stone. Exo's slightly overextended here, though, and needs a second wave of Lancers coming through, otherwise going to start snowballing the other way now. Because Infests are a problem. The good news, though, is he did set up some Raxes on the forward, and those have been prioritizing Lancer production. So it looks like he's leveraging the back for Exos. Lancers come out the forward. Means you just kind of get a replacement for your tank much quicker in these fights.
Yeah, but it's really interesting as well as I look at this. So we saw as the Fiends go forward, try to jump on top of this, but again, it's just infinite kite here for right now. Even with the speed boost coming in from the Gaunts, we're going to see an Effigy get dropped, a little bit more healing or a little bit more tankiness off the top. Fiends looking for the surround right now. Albino might have overcommitted just a little bit here. The surround is really good, and he absolutely has. 3 Lancers are not enough to win this fight. The snowball or the swing has turned. Albino, all this pressure, this infinite kite. Well, he got a little too big for his britches, and yeah, these Lancers in the trees are nice enough, but they're also just kind of stuck here.
Yeah, and they have the hold here because the base can be exposed. That was a sick read, though. What happened there, Lorimbo? He immediately pops all remaining brutes to get the Fiend surround, pinches him up against the tree line, and gets the wipe. And this all goes back to the early fight that happened just south of where we're at now, right? That was the moment where you could tell that Albino misread his timing slightly. He thought he'd have enough Lancers, enough time to get kinetic redirection in. Because he took such a dent to the front line, he overcommits scaling his back line. He doesn't have enough Lancers to hold in the fort anymore. And now you're in an awkward situation where, sure, you're mass Lancers against mass Gaunts, but the count is so high, it's not effective. So a tech comes in, the Vulcans have been added in, and this now should force a transition out of Lorimbo.
Yeah, so Lorimbo does have a Hellforge. There is that available to him. He can go into Magmadons, get Demon Hoof Tremor Magmadons on the map right now. No stuns available, not yet. It is getting researched, though, so there is that. But Lorimbo was just getting prepped. He said, okay, there's going to come a point in time where I'm going to need something else. I'm going to get that Hellforge down, but again, I don't really care about it right now because I have been winning or been doing enough. I really only care about these Magmadons once Vulcans, once higher tier tech comes out of Albino. But as we learned yesterday, there are counters. The stun coming in from the Vulcans, which we don't have right now. That upgrade's not available, but once you get that out, you can actually counteract the Demon Hoof Tremor, the stun trample coming out of Magmadons. You can cancel that one down. And I think what I would love to see, I don't know, I was going to say Weavers against Vulcans are really nice, but as we can saw, you can even dash out of the Lash. So, you know.
Yeah, if he does go towards Weavers, it'll be intriguing. It feels like the way the map's spreading right now is like, in theory, it could be good if you can keep things hunkered south side and does have the extra base to bait attention there. But we've seen the weakness of Weavers is when the gameplay is a little bit wider. And in fairness, you do have that fully exposed west side, right? So just something to be conscious of if he tries to go to the classic Weaver counter that we saw out Kel a lot. For now, Magmadon should be super impactful here if he can kind of break that back line. Gaunt count is insanely high. Bubble Shield is going to come out. Vulcans able to hold for the moment. The rest have to break away. And it looks like the Medtechs arrive a little bit too late to turn this fight around. Hellborn's now getting added in by Albino. A good opportunity. Oh, sorry, by Lorimbo. A good opportunity now to just push forward and try to pressure onto that third base.
Yeah, notice as well, a couple of Brutes and Gaunts were really just distracting the reinforcements on the north side so he could just focus down all these other impactful units. Nanoswarm is great. It's healing 30 HP per second. That's doing a lot here to keep this Vulcan alive. But certainly Albino, he's been able to take the creep camp. That's really nice. He's got a little bit more resources. The problem really, as we take a look at this game though, is how do you break this high ground? There's a Buzzsaw turret. It's insanely tanky. The reinforcements are right there. You're fighting up a choke. That feels really hard. And because all the fighting is, because Lorimbo has expanded on this right side, because all the fighting is concentrated on this right side, this fourth base from Albino on the north is very far away from where anyone wants to play. And that means that realistically, it's going to be hard for Albino to go deal with, or for Lorimbo to go deal with, even if he thinks about it, even if he notices.
Yeah.
And these 3 Lancers from early on, a couple Brutes are going to struggle here. I love this run by.
Yeah, I think it's more just about gathering info. He wants to see if there's another sneaky switch coming up, because we did see a Hellborn added in, right? And I think it's important to know if your opponent's scaling Hellborns. That offers up a weak point. I feel like getting the Hellborns is usually, maybe sometimes feels a little bit too expensive. It's slow. It's kind of a methodical approach. And if you see that, you can kind of exploit it with a max exo spam. But right now, it looks like it is just remaining the blob focus for Lorimbo. He does have a substantial supply lead right now. And we are starting to see him pivot towards the center. Now, if he does fish to the north side, I don't think Albino can go for a trade. He will have to react.
Yeah, I do like this Fiend spam. I think he pretty much converted all of his brutes into Fiends just to run across the map. And the problem is, though, is that this fourth base was pretty exposed a minute ago. Now, there are 2 barracks here. There's a bit of a wall. We're seeing a sentry post is going to get taken down, but there are Lancers here in the choke. That's not really an opportunity, but it's also a bit of a distraction opportunity. You're trying to get on top of this high ground that we talked about that might be so hard to break.
Oh my.
But the Hellborn, they have that upgrade. They're doing burning damage. The Magmadons are just plugging the choke here, and the rest of the army with the effigy as well. Miasma's dropping. There we go. There's the Hexen upgrade. This is such a challenging position for... Actually, Albino cannot retake it at this point. He was woefully out of position. And Lorimbo, he's going to take this high ground. He's going to take this base down. The Fiends are going to start to find value. That being said, the flank on the left side on top of these Hellborn trying to get on top, it's not enough, though.
No, the Hellborns just stand their ground, right? They're just an effective counter to the Lancers before they can scale up, and that means Exos are having to fight against Gaunt to the tail end. Sick Miasma that led into the Glaive bounce that guaranteed the Bobs couldn't hold that, and GG will get called. So we bounce the series out. We go deeper into this beauty, where you can hold a reasonable number of choke points. You don't have multiple points of exposure into the main. The natural, a little bit more vulnerable, but I feel like the health cams always make it a bit easier to defend on this map number 3.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It also means that the health cams mean that it's maybe a little bit easier to attack. We saw in game 1 where you can just go and take the health camp. And granted, the health camp is a lot further away from the natural, from where you're expanding. Oh, I guess not really. If this is the third base that Lorimbo decides to take, which, again... The other thing that we talked about, we talked about this a lot yesterday, where Infernals are really good for the first 10 minutes, and then they start to fall off a little bit, theoretically. And we didn't see that in this last game, obviously, but that's kind of the overall trend. It's in large part because they are very Therium-starved. Infernals, all their good units, Hellborns, Hexens, Magmadons, are Hellborn particularly, with 250 Therium to cost. They are very Therium-starved. And that means that once you start to get them to 3-base play, most maps don't give you an easy third Therium. You got to go take a more exposed position. Some maps even don't even give you a natural Therium. And if you want to go and get that elsewhere, you got to drop like a second shrine for it to be efficient, and that's far more expensive than getting a scrapyard. The Therium economy, as the game goes later for Infernals, gets really weird, and that can really hurt your scaling. So we're going to have to see exactly, does Albino go and take this third base that gives him access to that Therium, or... does he try to play a little bit more defensively? Do we see someone take the secluded grove?
I think that tracks logically though, right? Like, I still remember back when EGC ran tournament at the start of the year, when we last had regular public access. Vanguard, I think they were like a 56% win rate on this map overall. And I do think that tracks for the reason why you highlighted. Like, the Therium is much more loose on the map. Obviously, when you play Vanguard, that central Therium between the second and the third, you can just drop a scrapyard. It's easy peasy, right? But Shrine is such a big investment that takes such a long time to even be accessible that I think it hurts Infernals at that transitional point where you're still able to kind of win the matchup as Vanguard by playing pretty hard in the Luminite heavy comps, mainly around Lancer.
Yeah, and that's another important. Lancers don't cost Luminite. They are very cheap, all things considered. Exos don't cost, Exos don't cost Therium either. Their upgrades do, but again, these units are very, very cheap. Or maybe not very cheap, but cheap enough where you can kind of spam them and you don't need to dedicate your resources to more things. And yeah, medtechs require a lot of Therium. Vulcans, sure, fine. But the requirement, your entire army doesn't need to spend Therium on it. The basic army, half the army, you're going to build a lot of Gaunts because Gaunts are the kind of the most flexible unit in the game that Infernals have, and it's 25 for 2. That adds up very quickly.
But I'm trying to remember, like, Exos, I think they are a little bit Therium, right? Is it 25, I think?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember if it's 25, yeah. So, like, it's kind of comparative to Gaunts, but I just feel like they're better than Gaunts, right? Like, if you're playing a PvP, better than Gaunts. If you're playing a PvE, yeah, Gaunts win.
Yeah, no, it's
nice
this
pinch.
It's the setup where I knew they used to cost Therium, and I could have sworn I was really surprised because I moused over an Exo production, like, messing around earlier, and I thought I saw only Luminite. I'm like, okay, I guess they made a change I missed because I'm just dumb.
I was nodding as you were saying, like, wow, did I just not glance this? Exo's really that easy? I could have sworn I had to spend some resources here. But I think the other interesting thing is around the medtech detail, right? Like with the buffs we've had to camps and health towers being more prominent now, I don't think medtechs are as high of a priority. So where that used to kind of starve the scale point at the Vanguard, they now have this more kind of Zergy aspect to their tier 1 comp without having to compromise with premium units.
Compromise with tier 1 units. Anyway. So, yeah, I think you're right. It does, you do kind of have to play on the map a little bit more as we see these Lancers just playing around a little bit. The vision camp is actually super important on this map because what it does is not only does it unlock, say, protection against run-bys kind of running around the north side, it also means that if Albinos or Lorimbo is able to take this, now he knows when his opponent's army is moving out. Now he has just like total knowledge of whether he can attack or whether he can't attack. Like right now, he sees these Lancers, there's no sentry post.
But there is kinetic redirection right now, so he really has to prioritize the Brute's damage here and make sure his folks find down the injured. Overcharge from the Bobs coming in. They are going to be mounting the defense of the sentry post coming up. An extra rack's being added in behind this. The Lancers a little bit outnumbered right now, but the split to buy more time, and the Buzzsaw is going to come in. So this should be enough to reset Lorimbo. A nice blocker to the effigy to make sure he has to retreat.
And man, those Buzzsaw cannons now, they are so much better than they used to be. Yeah, they do the same amount of damage to Gaunt's, but they actually chunk Bruce now in a much better way, and they are just, I mean, 570 HP, but more importantly, the 20 armor here means they take, was it like, it's like 72% as much damage? I forget exactly how the math works. It's a scaling percentage thing. But it's a lot, they take a lot less damage than they otherwise would. And that means that, yeah, it is breaking a position here with a fully repaired Buzzsaw cannon is not going to break down.
I think the other thing is, like, interesting enough, when you're against Brutes, like, the Brutes are going to bounce the glaives between them, right? Like, realistically, your melee line and your range line broke. And the reason that's important is, like, Lancers get counted out by Brutes with the timing, right? So, like, if you just have this Buzzsaw cannon that kind of pads that issue, you can basically be on a 1-unit comp to counter a 2-unit comp.
Yeah, that is a very certain thing. Is a
Okay, and by the way, it was the lights that the Buzzsaw still does a lot of damage against, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I could have sworn
heavy on Brutes and then Gaunt's a light.
Yeah, no, but I could have sworn I read the patch notes, and they moved more of the damage to base damage instead of the bonus versus light.
I think so. Wasn't it 13 before and then it went up to 18?
Like 20, yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking now, it's 18. I'm pretty sure it used to be 13.
I'm pulling up the patch notes here because I'm like, I don't think I'm crazy, but chat's telling me I'm crazy. I don't think I am.
I think you're onto something. I
don't think I'm
recall
hallucinating
something
here.
changed there that makes them feel a little bit better generalist-wise against anything. In the meantime, though, we have got Exo switch up now coming in, so we're getting the 2-unit comp online. Yeah,
let's see. Buzzsaw cannon. Oh, okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so I was thinking it stayed versus light. It was bonus versus biological to bonus versus light. That's what it was. Okay. So I was looking at the base damage. It used
to be bio, right?
Yeah,
and now it's light.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Never
was
mind.
it 13 before and went to 18? I remember 13 in there somewhere.
Yes, it went from 13 to 18, but you lose out on. But Brutes don't take the bonus damage anymore than they used to.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
So like it's not as good against Brutes, but it's not completely crippled. Like they padded it, right?
Yeah.
I still think it's a fair point. Like if you're playing on your Lancers and you have a sentry post, it gives you a defense against mass Brutes that you otherwise wouldn't have. And it has now padded him to get through to the Exos. We have got quick draw online. We've also got the kinetic redirection as well. And with free base, I wouldn't be surprised if like the next 2 minutes we see a switch into a few med techs added in. Because one annoying thing on this map is because of how wide the health camps play, it's very difficult to utilize them in an offensive pattern, especially when you know an Infernal player is going to park himself on this third base in front of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you can go, and what we historically, the way we've seen this get broken is you just kind of go Atlas drops and you take all the trees down, and you can build your concave. But for right now, we're not really seeing that. And also, by the way, pointing out here, there's a Wraithstone going down. So Infernals have 2 levels of static defense. I guess 3 if we talk about Shroudstone manifestation. One is the Shroudstone. It just does damage. It's a tower. It has 400 HP, but really not as much armor as it used to. It can die fairly quickly, but it does reasonable damage defensively. The other one, you can upgrade it into a Wraithstone, which instead of doing damage as a poke here, in the AoE, it slows enemy units. And also, it does 2.5% HP per second damage. So you put 2 of them together, it can really shut down a lot of aggressive play. And especially with this army on top, yeah, this is not going to be a position that is easy for Albino to assail. That being said, he has his 3 bases. We're going to see him tech up. We got a hangar bay on the way, or hangar bay done. I don't know if he's going for Hornets or evacs right now. We're going to have to see. But he's developing his tech just as well.
Yeah, and it's rough if we do see Hangar Bay play here, because if you look on the other side, we can actually see that Lorimbo was prepping around the Brutes a little bit here, as well as Magmadon. So he's going to have, like, full melee ground. Actually, if this is an airplay, it's genius from Albino. It, like, just puts him 2 steps ahead. It's definitely not something that scales fast, though. That's the only issue I find usually with Hangar Bays, because you can essentially mass Hornets, right? But a long time ago, they did have the air-to-ground damage nerfed, because I still remember the days where the cheesy, like, strategy was just 1 base, Hangar Bay, win with Hornets.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to be Hornets, just, again, strictly because we don't... Oh, we do have a solar habitat. Never mind. So
No, but it's straight into Helicarriers. He's going hard into the upper tiers here.
That's fun. Well, they're no longer nerfed, is the thing. Well, they're no longer broken, so you can actually use them. And we talked about this. Yeah. I literally have not seen a single helicarrier get made in the games I've played or the games I've cast. But the fun thing about these, right, is the range on the bombing run. Maybe it's not from the natural of Albino over to the 3rd base of Lorimbo, but it's pretty close.
But I feel like you could actually legit just sit in the secluded grove in the center, and you could bombing run everywhere, right? And wait, I haven't checked the stats. Do they get bonus damage against like light or something? It feels like the type of unit that probably should. I'm probably just imagining that, and it's not the case though. Still, it's an easy run by, right? And the reality is, when you've got all these gaunts that are not very tanky, if you misstep them once, it's the equivalent of just running into an Atlas drop.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to see how this thing works out. As I said, I have not seen this unit made a single time in any single game of Stormgate I've played or watched. So,
oh my god. And look at the way he's doing it as well. He's cut through to the center. He's setting up double sentry post. I imagine we're going to be looking at like a repair-o-matic one, just so that he can poke over the tree line with the helicarriers.
Makes a lot of sense, right? You just go and also he's going to probably try to take them. Yeah, there we go. There's a bunch more bobs as well. So we're going to see a command post go down. And this is the late game. I'm seeing chat say this is the late game that Lorimbo hates. And, you know, I can see... look, we haven't seen anything happen yet, but I can... just looking at this setup here, I can see why.
And like, I'm wondering, have we got... maybe mid-techs are getting priority on their tech, right? Because you get the Nanite Swarm, it's super effective. The Helicarriers with 50 extra armor. Like, how are you going to dent that, right? It's already a 20 armor unit. That's 600 HP. And mass gaunts are just going to tickle at that stage.
Yeah, and by the way, the one number I do know, if you're at 50 armor, you're taking about 50%. You're taking...
It's a percentile thing, right?
Yeah, you're taking about...
10 armor's 10% reduction, and 50 is 50%, and so on.
Yeah, no, it's not quite like that, because 10 armor is 9%. It's if you have 100 HP... If you have 100 HP and 50 armor, and if you have 100 HP and 50 armor... Well, if you have 50 armor, you're taking a third as much damage, right? It's 100 over 150.
Got it.
Is the math, if I remember correctly from how
we couldn't just keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple, stupid, right? But I do love, by the way, this effigy push going forward. And we have the Hellborn pushing as well. The problem is, I don't know that there are that many. I don't know that there's that many shadows. Oh, there's the bombing run.
Find out. Whoa! Big hit in, 2 go down, and no damage returned.
Yeah, what I was going to say is I don't know if there are any Shadow Spires. I don't know that there's any, like, really committed anti-air. Yes, Gaunts can be useful, but, I mean, you're just going to dive on top of this. I mean, that being said, Magmadons are going to run forward. Bubble Shield goes down on the first Helicarrier that's getting targeted down, but it is getting, well, no, okay, we do have some Shadow Flyers. The Madness Armor is absolutely there. These Helicarriers are getting shredded, and Lorimbo is making massive motion on forward. Tier 3 as well. He's got the Shroudfall on top of everything. All the units are getting healed up, even as the bombing runs go down. And this middle base is going to get widely broken here. Now, that's a big Animus cost. Absolutely. That's going to be a big cooldown that's no longer available to Lorimbo. But he uses it beautifully. Breaks the entire middle base down. It's a 3-base Vanguard player against a 4-base Infernal. And hey, maybe this is the breakthrough that Lorimbo's been looking for.
Yeah, he's going to go hunting with the Fiends now. Like, a sick read there as well. Like, what happened is the Bomber Run just gets baited out into the Hellborns. It looks sick at first, but then all of a sudden you've got, what, 50 Gaunts to say, okay, well, we're not a liability anymore, right? He just gets to brute force his way through. So great timing there. Kind of feels like Lorimbo was baiting for that. Like, the reality is, unless you make an Atlas switch, you don't have any other answer to the Hellborn, because sure as hell these Helicarriers can't just dive in quickly, pick them, and get out. So just a great timing attack. blocks the big eco rush forward, and now we're just talking about an Infernal player that is economically well and truly ahead.
Yeah. And I've seen people ask, can you kill the bombers? Yes, you absolutely can. We saw the Gaunts doing damage to them right there. And you do have to go, and you have to kind of rebuild them once that happens. So, yeah, you can absolutely target them down. What I think is actually a little surprising, and maybe the economy doesn't support it, maybe I just don't understand. Again, this is literally the first time I've seen this unit get made, but we have no machine lab. There's no upgrades being researched, because if you get the upgrade, as we can mouse over this helicarrier right now, you get the upgrade,
stealth.
Bombers are stealth. It makes life even more painful. So, you know, maybe that's worth looking at a little bit later.
I guess he just thought he was going to be fighting into Shroud Stones, right? And they do reveal. So, like, it kind of makes sense. If you're defending, I think stealth is better. Weirdly enough, if you're attacking, it kind of sucks a bit. And oh my, the Dragon Boy's here. Blade Dragon's now moving in. Helicarriers going to go for the drop. Drones on the backside. Big Scud launch comes through. Wipes out a lot of the Gaunts, but the beefy boys on the front side are still unanswered, and this Blade Dragon is now a big problem that Albino doesn't have a clean answer to.
No, he doesn't, but that was a big bombing run, and all the Shadow Flyers, they've been committed here. Now, that being said, one Helicarrier will go down, but the Shadow Flyers, they've spent their anti-armor load. They're not really there for right now, as the Magmadons are going to run forward. We got the Dragon firing on top of this as well. Albino, he wants to hold this, and Lorimbo needs to break this right now. Even Effigy is going down. All of the spells are going to get spent. And that tier 2 Helicarrier gets targeted down. More bombing runs, but looks like they're not going to land all that well. And Lorimbo continues to run forward here into this third base. The med techs are going down. The tech's going down. The bubble buzzsaw cannon is going to fall as well. And in this late game, this position that Lorimbo supposedly hates, seems like he's found a solution. The Helicarrier is pretty much all that remains. Albino loses in this series 2-1. The Helicarriers did not do enough. But man, this was a cool series.
He